Well, Western sanctions on Russia have hit its overall economy hard. But as we just heard there, they're also targeting members of President Vladimir Putin's inner circle. Let's take a look at the men who are officially overseeing Putin's policies. Putin's advisors have been with him for a long time. Sergei Shoigu is the Minister of Defense, who is reported to vacation with Putin and who was in charge of the annexation of Crimea in 2014. Valery Gerasimov is the Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces. He's had a role in Putin's military campaigns for decades and is in charge of the day-to-day operations in Ukraine. Then there is Nikolai Patrushev, Secretary of the Security Council, known to be a hardliner, who has long felt the West was out to get Russia. Sergei Naryshkin is the Director of Foreign Intelligence. He may have lost some influence recently after Putin chastised him during a televised Security Council meeting. And then there is Russia's Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, the chief diplomat and public face of Putin's policy for years now. He reportedly advised more diplomacy before the Ukraine invasion, but clearly his boss was not in the mood to listen. What is not clear is how much Putin is listening to his advisors. There is speculation that he may be sidelining them. And we can talk about that more with our correspondent, Emily Sherwin. She has been reporting from DW's Moscow office, but that was closed down by Russian authorities. So she's joining us here in our studio in Berlin. Emily, does Vladimir Putin, how much is he listening to his advisors?
Well, when it comes to the decision to go to war, various experts that I've been speaking to who talked to sources within the Kremlin have been saying that essentially that decision was Putin's brainchild. Most in the political elite apparently didn't know that Vladimir Putin was planning this full-scale invasion. They thought that it would just be kind of a takeover of those separatist regions, the Donetsk People's Republic and the Luhansk People's Republic. And it was only apparently, according to media reports, a handful of people who really knew what he was planning. The first person, you mentioned him, is the Minister of Defense, Sergei Shoigu. Some people even say that he told Sergei Shoigu about his plans for this military operation back in September when he went on a holiday with him in the taiga. They went on, long hikes, kind of wearing military fatigues. Those pictures were widely distributed on state television as well, and apparently that's when Shoigu was told about Vladimir Putin's plans. The chief of armed forces, Valery Gerasimov, who you mentioned, apparently knew, and most likely the head of the FSB, Russia's security services, knew. The security services have apparently had Putin's ear for a long time now and have been, gaining influence within the country. You can even see that when you live there, more and more police presence, even on the streets. But apparently even the presidential administration didn't know. There wasn't a clear line in the first few hours after the invasion when it comes to reporting as well, which usually is something that indicates that something was planned out, and there was a narrative on state TV as well, but that wasn't the case for the first few hours, apparently.
So what does that mean? I mean, how isolated is Putin in his decisions?
Well, one expert that I was speaking to said that before, Putin was kind of almost an institution. He's almost the umbrella over the whole system. He was like a CEO with shareholders that he had to consult with, including some of the men we've seen there. Now, more and more, apparently, he's taking his decisions more alone. He has actually been also, this many people point out, isolated physically as well, because he has mainly been in his residence outside of Moscow in Novo-Ogaryovo, isolating there, protecting himself from COVID since the pandemic began. And that means extreme security measures. Apparently, anyone who wanted to see him in person and wants to see him now has to isolate for 14 days. So obviously people who are directly involved in government business, that's quite a difficult thing to do. So that means they were talking to him on the phone via video link. And I think perhaps even for Putin himself, it might have been hard to gauge their reaction to his plans without being in the same room as him.
And Emily, just quick last question. How much support does Putin and his inner circle, how much do they actually have among the general population for this war?
Well, we don't know. There are official numbers which put the support at around just over 60%, 65%. But that's, of course, a government government pollster. Other independent experts are putting it more at 50%, but that's still pretty high. A lot of people are following the state TV line, which is that Russia is liberating Ukraine from this Nazi occupation, that they're not hitting civilian targets, that there are no victims, essentially, and that the sanctions are, the West is to blame for that. But, of course, there is quite a big opposition within the country. People have been protesting. We've seen that, despite the fact that that's a huge risk to them.
DW's Emily Sherwin, thank you so much for sharing that reporting with us.